know you're gonna dig this.
Welcome to the End Zone Club, where we have conversations that are designed to push you from walking in potential to fulfilling your purpose. And introducing our host, Anthony Mitchell.
Yo, what's up, everybody? This is Anthony Mitchell. Just wanted to say that we have some company today, meaning I got a special guest who's going to keep it hot, flavorful. But before I introduce him, I do have to say, whatever platform you were streaming this podcast from, please give us a like, a share, a rate, a subscription. Help us to get this content out to the four corners of the world. But before we do so, we got to hear from our sponsors. So stay tuned.
Hello, everyone. This is Andre Truitt, representative for Just Gifted Clothing Brand. If you have individual talent of any kind, we are talking to you. Join this clothing brand that has built a community of people that encourages others to use their gifts and talents. Man, we are the fastest growing brand that you haven't heard of yet. To find out what we're really about, just go to justgiftedclothingbrand.com. Let me spell that out for you. JUSGIFTED clothingbrand.com. One more time for you. JUSGIFTED clothingbrand.com. Talent in any way, you're just gifted.
What's up, everybody? It's Anthony Mitchell coming back at you live with another edition of the End Zone Club, where, as always, we have conversations designed to not just let you walk in your potential, but actually fulfilling your purpose. And of course, these conversations are wrapped around things we know now that we wish we knew when we were younger. How have y'all been? How have you been? How's your mama and them, your family doing? It's been a minute since I had a chance to talk with you guys. Exactly 15 days. Just got off the tail end of a family trip. We got up, spur of the moment, spring break aligned with 2 birthdays in my house, i.e. our 2 oldest boys. And we decided to just pack up and go. Just take a few days away, enjoying life and its properties thereof. I don't know what you guys have done for spring break, but I would like to hear a little more about it. Right? Talk to me. But anyway, as far as we're concerned, we got out, went to Atlanta, and it was weird because we got there, got checked in and everything, and almost immediately it begins to pour. I'm talking about rain. It begins to pour, like basically all through the night into the next morning. Weather begins to drop into the 30s. And if you were like myself, that is a terrible combination when you were thinking about fun times plus vacation plus away from home. That's not the conditions or the ideal conditions that you would like to run into. But we ran into it. And coming back from the trip, of course, it rained a little more. Got a chance to stop by, see one of our good friends who's actually been on the podcast, i.e. Eric Matthews. Got a chance to chop it up with him. Look forward to working with him in a few months. As you guys know, every year, Eric, who's a former Green Bay Packers wide receiver, won a Super Bowl with the team. On that team, he had guys like Brett Favre, Reggie White, and others. He's on the team, won a Super Bowl. Every year we do a free camp in my hometown, which we give back to the kids. And every year it is getting bigger. So I'm excited about it. But coming back, go back to work, do what we do. And I wanted to jump on and talk with you guys because while we were away, got a chance to have a conversation with a friend of mine who asked me about the principle of giving and tithing. I'm not going to make today's podcast very religious. I'm going to just use practical wisdom because I think as it pertains to giving, there is an unhealthy attitude in our community as it relates to us, because a lot of time we see giving strictly from a financial gains and loss way of thinking. And I think that's catastrophic. So for us as people in our community, one of the reasons I want to talk about giving is because a lot of life that I live, I learned it through other people, older people. I've gained a lot of wisdom through sitting with people that have had life experiences, and because of their wisdom, I've listened to it in a means of trying to circumvent me having to go down certain roads in life and learn things the hard way. And giving is probably one of the most important messages I have ever been taught. But let me rewind this a little bit. If you guys, y'all tell me how it was for you growing up. But in my situation, being around a lot of older people, you'll find that they range, right, in how they teach principles. You have some older people that are very hands-on, meaning that they like to use a lot of words, a lot of examples, a lot of storytelling. They like to really get engaged with you and teach you. And then you get those who are more intuitive and less hands-on, in that they like to teach you by example. They like to allow the life they live to be an example for your learning. So sometimes they may not tell you how to do things, but if you watch them, they're very consistent in their approach. So I've had both models, and giving for me was really ingrained in my life, in that I have a chance to grow up around people, for example, who were foster parents. I personally think that's one of the greatest forms of sacrifice that an adult can take, is knowing you're going into a situation where you have a child that maybe has been abused or has not been properly taken care of. There's some love that they never received. There's some affection. There's some nurturing that along the way they've missed. And because of that, maybe developmentally, there are some things that child doesn't have. And you know that beforehand, and you raise your right hand to step in as a surrogate for this child and raise them. I have to applaud them, because there are a lot of parents, even a lot of fathers, a lot of people in this broken community that we live in that do not rise to the occasion for taking care of their own kids. So for you to purposefully, or even stepfather, stepmother, sometimes they don't care for someone else's child, even if it's in a marriage, like they would their own. There's a difference between, you guys see what I'm saying? There's a difference between the children that someone else has sired or fathered or mothered coming into this union than they do their own. And sometimes that causes conflict. So for someone to put aside all of that and to take care of someone else's child, I think that's important. But what they're doing is they're giving from a place that is not monetarily dictated. When we're in church and we hear the pastor talk about giving, or when you're in social media, there's a lot of threads where people are either for or against giving. The first thing that comes to mind is money. I do think that's a very unhealthy view, and I do think that is something that we have to change the way we teach it. People shouldn't hear giving and automatically think money, because many parts of our society that run outside of business have to do with the energy and the effort you give, and basically seeing problems or seeing things that need to be addressed, that the first thing it needs is your time and your attention. That's something that we have tapped into even with our community offerings, is seeing particular issues that reside in our community and addressing it. As a father, as a husband, as a man, I do realize that I have basically become a pariah, so to speak, because in a lot of communities, there are a lot of kids that are growing up without fathers. I don't take my responsibility as a mentor or as a positive example lightly, because I realize that at some given point, something we are offering the community needs to be seen in a positive light by some of those that we are attempting to represent. So if we are giving, i.e. a dance camp like we are in June, for even young ladies, if that some of the young ladies that come into attachment or connection with what we are offering that don't have maybe a positive view of men, maybe they haven't seen good representation of men in their home. Everybody's story is different. You can't just assume because I'm home as a father, everybody else has that, or because my wife is home as a mother that everybody else has that. So when you come in contact with me, now I bear the brunt of the responsibility of being a positive example for you to see. By doing that, it plants a seed of hope in any young person, any young child, or even some of the older people that there are still some men, I'm speaking specifically about men right now, that understand their role in life and desire to actually play it. The reason I have to talk about men in this capacity is because the women are knocking it out the park, raising family in our absence. So again, back to my point, a lot of giving has to do with us seeing things that need to be done. And first of all, giving it your time and attention. Excuse me, guys. It's that sinus season. But away from that, I want to implore you guys, what around you needs your time and attention? Sometimes I see my son, my youngest son at that. He is going through that stage where now he's just discovering sports. And unlike me, when I first started discovering sports, I didn't try to connect with any of my dad's teams. Like my dad was an Indianapolis Colts fan. He liked Auburn Tigers and the Atlanta Braves. I kind of found my identity in sports through a lot of my friends. A lot of my friends at the times were 49er fans. And of course, Giants fans. Giants were in close proximity. I watched both teams. But as I got older, I really love the 49ers, but I still like my childhood team, the Giants. But where I'm getting at is now my son the youngest has begun to really like sports. And he's on TikTok and he's making these TikToks every week about his sports predictions, who's winning certain games. And I enjoy seeing him do this because he's putting in a lot of research before he posts videos so that he can have the right content. But as a father, as I'm looking at what he's doing, I realize that part of what he is exemplifying is what he sees molded in him with me being in the home, because he's identifying with all of my teams. I see him now going to school pretty faithfully with an LSU Tigers jersey on. I would have never done that. I do like the Auburn Tigers just because my dad grew up rooting for them and I watched them all the time. I've had a lot of respect for the Indianapolis Colts, but my identity wasn't found in that. But I see my son finding a lot of his identity right now in my shadows. It implores me to sometimes just give him my time and attention, see what he's learned. If with him having a lot of more free time, there's a lot of news that comes. It's free agency. There's a lot of news that comes out, right? I'm trying to repeat what I was saying because I cut myself off. But with it being free agency, there's a lot of signings that are going on right now. And he's abreast to all of that stuff well before I am. And he keeps me alert. Hey, Daddy, this is what happened with Jimmy G. Hey, Daddy, who is Hargreaves? Daddy, what do you think about Trey Lance? Daddy, Brock Purdy just had a UCL surgery. He's telling me all of this information in real time. And I realize all he wants now is my time and attention. I don't take that lightly. So when I see him extending from taking these moments of getting all of this information in real time, and now he's in the yard. I see him running routes, or he's pulling the basketball goal out, and he's practicing Ja Morant moves. You know, we're a big Ja Morant family in my household. I go out there with him, and I'll dribble with him, or I'll throw routes with him, or I'll teach him some things because I play wide receiver too. I'll teach him some lineman drills. We're going through offensive and defensive lineman drills, but now what he needs is my time and attention. That is not money mandated. So as it pertains to giving, I personally have a rule of thumb that is so So yeah, I do have a very controversial take on those who have those who teach giving, and you guys may be offended at me for saying this, but I think one of the reasons we have such an unhealthy view about giving is that some people have taught it incorrectly. And for me, I don't like hearing somebody talking to me about planting and sowing that has never done any planting or sowing naturally. Because the very same principle that works for us farmers, yeah, your boy's a farmer, I get out. Now, I'm not like a I'm not like a Jed Clampett, but I'm more like a guy with a green thumb, raised bed gardens. My family and I like to do this every year. We'll get out, we'll have a little fun with it. And actually last year, my garden was sponsored. I don't know if I can drop the names, but hey, we give them good advertising. We got a small grant to plant a garden. So I do love planting. And over time, I've realized that when people are teaching us just to give money, right? You do know whatever seed you plant is what you're going to reap. So that's why I'm a firm believer in understanding principles of planting before you get into a point where you don't want to give. Because again, a lot of our community, if you're a person that travels, I want to drive my point home, because if you're a person that travels like we have through the years, there's certain towns, cities, states that we have gone to that maybe back in the 90s were very affluent, flowing places. I mean, everything about the economy was robust. You go to certain malls, right? Booming. You go to certain movie theaters, clean, fresh popcorn, good customer smiling service. But if you give it time, you can tell what kind of inhabitants you have in that particular area by how they keep vision up. I say vision, but how they support economy. If you come back 10 years from now and now the customer service is no longer smiling, it's no longer fast, now the building is beginning to run down, now the seats have holes in the movie theaters, now the popcorn tastes like it's 2 days old, now it feels like the same oil they popped it in last night, they're popping it again today. When you start experiencing that, now you used to could go in certain places in the same mall, and you could go in, good customer service. Now you've got security following you around, and a lot of the companies that you used to once know, a lot of the shopping places no longer exist. What do you do next? You realize that everything that's up today is not going to be up tomorrow, because when people aren't giving back their time and attention in areas that it is needed, that very thing will fall apart. And that's the same thing in any part of you young people's lives. I want you to understand, if you're not giving back in your relationships, if you're not giving back in your schoolwork, if you're not giving back in your relationship to your parents, i.e. listening to what they say, your older siblings that are here in your life to give you guidance in the right path, your mentors, your teachers, your instructors, I promise you, you're going to start noticing your quality and style of life going down, because your decisions are ultimately going to lead you down the path you don't want to go. And that's learning things the hard way. The hard way is not a fun way, FYI. So understand giving as being a mainstream nugget that's going to keep you relevant in areas you need to be relevant in. I promise you, if you go to work and you follow instructions, there's nothing anybody can say about you or against you or knock you off your pedestal. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you can wash your hands of any situation that people may throw at you, you'll get the last laugh. I promise you, in life, if you just take time to seeing things and addressing it. I know for a fact I had a relative who looks like somebody took a bomb and threw it in their room. And it was the junkiest room probably, or maybe the second junkiest that I've ever seen. And we often told them, why wait until this room gets to this point? Like, everything on the floor is covered with some form of junk. Like, how can you find your bed? It's like, it's piles and piles and piles of just mess. How could you live like this? But they had a tendency of letting everything stack up, stack up, stack up, stack up, to the point that now it's like out of control, and that's when they wanted to address it. But that's not how this should really work. Take the time to give your time and attention right now, every day, if this individual, to areas that's needed. What I was going to say is, if this individual had taken that same approach, and instead of eating and then throwing the paper towel on the floor, instead of drinking and throwing the cup on the other side of the room, instead of jumping out of dirty clothes, leaving it right there where they jumped out of it at. If they had taken that same time to just pick the dirty clothes up, put it in the hamper, get up, throw the paper towel in the trash can, get your cup, go put it in the sink and wash it. Don't just leave it. They had just made this into a habit. I promise you, life would have given back twofold. I know all of us have heard the golden rule that basically, I'm going to paraphrase it as we call it in rap, that what you put out is what comes back to you. If you put out good, good will come back. And that's, to me, the heart of giving that I learned from old people, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's why now when I see homeless people, I try to feed them. That's why sometimes we have kids that come through church and other places that don't have clothes. Here you go, give this away. Man, I'm giving away, and I'm not saying this as a brag, but I'm trying to point you back to a direction. I've given away so many clothes, so many shoes, given away just random things, hotel rooms. Here's a place for you to stay tonight. I know you've been on the streets, but it's too cold. Take this. And I promise you, there have been times in life where I've hit some pretty low points. There have been times in life where I didn't have. There have been points and times where I wanted to do something, didn't have the money, and those very things that I sowed came back. I think I talked about this on an earlier platform. I don't think it was here, though. But when I was several years ago, when the New Orleans Hornets first came to New Orleans, well, coming from Charlotte to New Orleans, I used to take some of the younger kids to basketball games that had never been to NBA games before. And I promise you, they would have the time in their life. A lot of them probably to this day have never really spoken again about it, but I do notice them going to NBA games because of social media. I see it. But it was like, hey, I wanted to plant this first time opportunity in your life. And by giving this to you, it has nothing to do with money, but it's more about the memory of being able to say, hey, we done this together. And we would go out, we would go to games. I never went with the kids alone. I always made sure that there were other adults because, again, even in doing good, you always want to make sure you're doing good the right way. And that keeps me covered. But I'll be doggone. Years down the road, I wanted to see the Memphis Grizzlies, wanted to see Ja Morant, and just kind of nonchalantly spoke it out there in the atmosphere like, Lord, I'd like to see this kid play. And I kid you not, courtside tickets popped up in my lap. Didn't ask, was in the house one day taking a shower, and I got a call from an individual. He was like, hey, listen, I got these games, to these tickets to the Memphis Grizzlies tonight. I cannot go. And I just got to thinking, he was like, a voice spoke to me and said, give these to Anthony. He's like, hey, I know it's spur of the moment. You only have a few hours, but it had everything. 6 courtside seats. But he said, I know for a fact I've got 4. I have to see if I can get these other 2, but 4 was all I needed for my group. 2 of my sons and my father-in-law, we went to the game, and I was ready to go. The game went into overtime. It was getting late. I'm like, hey, I got to go to work in the morning. I tapped my father-in-law, hey, you want to jump up and you all ready to go? He said, no. He was like, man, I've never sat this close to the court. We were like 4 or 5 seats away from the court. Like you could see the playbook. We were that close. And he was like, man, this is a opportunity of a lifetime. He's like, I'm going to see every bit of this game. And again, that seat is what's got my youngest playing basketball, seeing Ja Morant up close dunking on Karl Anthony Towns. And that's not the only time. Kobe Bryant's last trip to Memphis. Also, some tickets popped up. There we were. So when I'm talking about giving, a lot of what we give, a lot of what we put out, well beyond the money, just time and attention to detail, effort making other people's lives greater, these very things will come back. And that's why as a planter, I've got asparagus in the ground. I've got sweet potatoes. what we call iced potatoes. Most people call them just regular potatoes. We got kale, lettuce, mustard, turnip greens. Got that in the ground because I am expecting a return at some point where I can go out there and I can pick my plants and I can cook them the way I like them, what the season is like we like to do in the South. I'm expecting that because I do know that if I put it out, it's due back to me. And I want you guys to have that same approach in life, that if I'm putting in the work, I want good grades. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to put in the work so that I can have those very things. If I want good relationships, I'm going to start studying relationships books, but I'm going to get around people that have healthy family dynamics and learn these principles. If I want to be a singer, I'm going to understudy somebody who can do it. I promise you, that's what giving is. It's about positioning yourself to get back things you want in life. So don't look at life stingily. Don't look at life with a closed hand and a closed heart and a closed mouth. I promise you, if you do everything as unto God, it'll come back to you. But anyway, that's it. You guys have got another episode of the End Zones Club podcast. I'm excited about Monday's special guest. We have none other than Raymont Harris, former Chicago Bear running back, in the building with us. We're going to be talking about some mental health and just talking, fellas. This is a needed conversation. I'm excited. So guys, stay tuned in. And with that said, you are listening to the End Zone Club podcast. This is your host, Anthony Mitchell, and today I've given it to you about giving.